Hello there, YouTubers. This is Gus Estacio from Healing X Outreach, and doing another video. I said last video I was going to do something about the spiritual man versus the natural man, but actually I'll do that later on. This is one of the big scriptures that I actually encountered when I came out of the witnesses, or actually when I was born again. And it has a really broad application, and so I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about it. But first, let me read the text. It's actually in 2 Timothy chapter 3, and it should be a very familiar passage for many ex-witnesses. And I'm going to read verses 6 through 9. And I'm reading from the Revised Standard Version. It's my Orthodox Study Bible with the apocryphal books in it, but the apocryphals in the Old Testament. So anyway, verses 6 through 7, 6 through 9. First of all, it talks about all the moral decline, about people having these qualities and a form of godly devotion. We're familiar with that part, but denying its power. And then it goes, and from such people turn away. For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never able to come to knowledge of the truth. Now as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, disapprove concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. And so I'm going to, first of all, apply that text to a mutual alma mater that all of us are familiar with. Come take a ride with me. my man David Harris Jr. Come take a ride with me. I'm on my way to my next place of gainful employment. Just leaving the garage. I was at the top of the garage here at the Labor Department. And usually it's not a lot of traffic on Fridays. And just as I thought it wouldn't be, there's not a lot of traffic. I can see up here. It's normally, just pillar to post traffic trying to come out of the garage, and I think some of you guys have seen or at least experienced it with me a little bit. All right, so it talks about those who have a form of godly devotion but are, of course, morally, corrupt, and we know that can absolutely apply to the witnesses. There are so many witnesses that are hiding their sins, doing things, really dirty stuff in behind the scenes. We know, of course, there's a pedophile problem, so there are brothers in that organization, pioneers, elders, out there preaching to people and still can't keep their hands off of kids. And then it says something really interesting of a distinct application to the cult of our birth. It says that these are the type that go into households, leading away weak women laden with sins. That could apply to men also, but this goes back to my last video, Isaiah 5:13. It talks about, my people suffer for lack of knowledge, or people that are ignorant because they are following spiritually famished men, Isaiah 5:13. And because of their ignorance, they go into the pit. They go into Sheol. And here we have these corrupt people that are going into households, and people that are probably seeking help, spiritual help, people that are sinful people, not just women, but men. And here comes a knock at the door, and here they are, the saviors, they're going into households. The scripture says going into households, or going into houses, some translations. Who else goes into houses? That has such a great application to our former cult specifically. but it could also apply to the Mormons. They go into houses. Jesus talks about the Pharisees and Sadducees. He says that they traverse sea and land and make one a proselyte. As they convert someone. And by making one a proselyte, they make him twice a son of hell or son of Gehenna. So, by the conversion to their religion, this person was already condemned. Now they're really condemned because of their conversion into false religion. Now they think that they've been saved. They think the Pharisees has got the truth. And instead, they have become further into the pit of the mire of their not only sinfulness, but into false ideas about God and religion and whatnot. So I think that these really have a great application towards Jehovah's Witnesses. And then it talks about Jannes and Jambres. Now, do you know who Jannes and Jambres were? Jannes and Jambres were actually the top magicians in Pharaoh's court. And they went with Moses. And when they went with Moses, they caused a whole bunch of problems. They were responsible for the golden calf. They were just always leading people astray into idolatry until finally they get killed. That God takes them out. And so here he says that, what I notice is says that they're ever learning and yet never able to come to knowledge of the truth. Oh, what was it about the witnesses that kept us ever learning? Well, they were always putting up new books, new light. There's one CD-ROM that we used to be able to buy that had all of Rutherford's books. It was called Rutherford's Rainbow. What an appropriate CD-ROM. And if you had the CD-ROM, you had all of Rutherford's writings, except for the finished mystery, which was somehow categorized amongst Russell's books, even though Russell did not really write the finished mystery. The so-called final studies of the scriptures. It was actually co-authored by Rutherford and C.J. Woodworth. And then, of course, there would be other, finished mysteries, but not affiliated or pushed as one of Russell's writings. So anyway, so ever learning and yet never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. That applies to all the vast literature of the Watchtower Society. But then there's something else. It says that their folly would be clear to all. That is that, those who do know the truth, and this is what Paul is writing. He's saying that, people that really know the truth, people that have an authentic dollar bill can tell the fake money because they are familiar with real currency. And that was the issue then, is that the Christian church was able to identify false from the truth because they knew the truth. And that is where we in the XJW community sometimes fall short of. We have, we're just so happy, so celebratory about people that come out of the Watchtower Society. And as long as they're not Jehovah's Witnesses, great. We celebrate. But, we failed to negate the fact that there are a lot of people who come out of the Watchtower, but the Watchtower don't come out of them. They may come out for various reasons. They may come out of the organization because they don't want to listen to the governing body, but they still got those teachings. Still got a lot of those Watchtower teachings. I'll give you an example. The True Faith Jehovah's Witnesses in Romania. Still a bunch of people that think like Jehovah's Witnesses. Just got a whole new governing body. I'll give you another person. Greg Stafford wrote 3 editions of his book, Jehovah's Witnesses Defended. The first edition, he was actually really defending the Watchtower Society's teachings. By the second edition, he was kind of, fibbing on some of the Watchtower's teachings. He didn't agree with some of them. By the third one, he was calling Jehovah's Witnesses, not Jehovah's Witnesses affiliated with the Watchtower, but Jehovah's Witnesses, or Witnesses of Jah, are all those who carry the Watchtower teachings outside of the Watchtower Society, including his little group called Christian Witnesses of Jah. If the modern day version of Greg Stafford, and if Greg really was to start a YouTube channel, he would have a huge following. If he would have started earlier in YouTube, he would have had a huge following. The modern version of Greg Stafford today on YouTube is a guy named, what's his name? Oh, I forgot his name. I think his name is King something. Oh, I can't remember his name. My mind went blank. There is a YouTube channel. Oh, E Watchman. And I forgot the name of the guy's name, but it's something King. But E Watchman, actually, his channel started out defending Watchtower teachings. He's a YouTube channel called E Watchman. And then he started to evolve, just like Greg Stafford. And he started to now reject some of the teachings of the Watchtower Society. And now what's happened to E Watchman's channel is he's pretty much got a new spin, a lot of still old Watchtower teaching, justifying some of the Watchtower's teachings, and has basically now reinvented Watchtower teachings into his own little spin of Unitarian doctrines and his idea of what scriptures mean. So he has now his own following. It's basically a little schism group on YouTube channel of Watchtower teachings, and that has always been the case. And I'm going to say something right now that's going to be a little controversial for the XJW community, because we have this tendency to put people on pedestals that still really regurgitate Watchtower teaching. And yeah, some of the work that we do, and I think the last video I talked about eating the meat, spitting out the bones. Some of the work that some of us have done has been helpful in getting people out of the Watchtower Society, but some of the work that we're doing is still reinventing the old wheel of the Watchtower's teachings. I mean, we really haven't left the Watchtower. We've just reinvented it and developed our own new following. And some of these YouTube channels, you can definitely see it's old Watchtower stuff, just reinvented. I'll tell you one of the things that happens when you leave the Witnesses. You want something similar. You want because you feel like they had a lot of things right in the Kingdom Halls. They just had a few things wrong. And so you don't really want to start from scratch. You want to retain some of those things. And so what happens is stuff that happened to me. When I left the Watchtower Society, I actually became a Christian. I became a Christian. That is, I became a mainstream historic Christian. That means I believed in the doctrines of Christendom. Just like the Watchtower Society says, you read the Bible alone, it's only going to lead you to darkness, and darkness for them is Christendom's teachings. But I did not know anything about the Bible student movement. And so I encountered the Bible students, the Russellites, the International Bible Student Association. And you can encounter them on, I think, BibleStudents.org. There were a couple of web channels back then. I think one was International Bible Students Association.org. I don't know if some of them are still around, but I was going to church on Sundays, and every other Sunday I was going to go visit the Bible students. And so I actually joined. I became a member of the Bible Students and was going to the Bible Student Association for a year and a half. And the Bible students that I was going to were very liberal Bible students. They did not go through the studies in the scriptures volumes. They gave me a lot of free literature. I got a lot of old Watchtower Bomb volume reprints from them. And very nice people. And what's crazy is that I actually was able to fellowship with them. And they met in somebody's house, and they had an elder. They had two elders, and you joined the little institution for voting for elders, which was back then Pastoral Bible Institute, and they have a journal called the Herald, which is what the Watchtower used to be called. It's called Watchtower Heralding Jehovah's Kingdom, or heralding God's kingdom at one time, and they just now call it the Herald. And they had a couple other magazines, and really well done magazines. And so I used to meet with them, but and not until I went to the convention did I realize exactly what was going on and what they were teaching and what they were hardliners on. And then I came to realize that, wow, I really wanted the organization, minus some of the teaching, so bad that I joined basically another organization that was still very similar to the old one. And I know a lot of us witnesses, we wish that we could find a church where it would be just ex-Jehovah Witnesses. And I've had through the years people say, we should, why don't you start a church and we can get a whole bunch of ex-witnesses to go to the church and think that's the solution. And that's not the solution. And there's some YouTube channels where people are still lock, stock, and barrel stuck in witness mentality. And now I'm going to say something really controversial. You know who still thought like a witness, did a lot of great things for a lot of us, because they had a crisis of conscience. And remember that. The title of his book was Crisis of Conscience. He wrote his book because his conscience was bothering him. Ray France. And a lot of us like to call him a Christian. And we throw the word Christian very loosely around. We just throw it around. And I guess if you're going to embrace Christianity under anything that is taught under the veil of Christianity, then he would be considered a Christian. If you have low standards of Christianity and basically you can teach anything as long as you say the name Jesus, then that's Christianity. If that's your definition for Christianity, just because you say the name Jesus, then why stop there? Why not call Jehovah's Witnesses Christians? Why not call Mormons Christians? And so it goes back to the idea of what I once said, one of my pastors said, my Jesus is not a 300-pound Asian woman. And so the idea is the fact that Ray was still very much a Jehovah's Witness mentally. And he still held on to a great deal of Watchtower teaching. And yes, his book still had a huge impact, will continue to have a huge impact in people's lives. But one of the reasons why Ray's book and Ray has such a huge impact, part of the reasons, is that so many of us are still looking for leadership. And we look at Ray, who's a former governing body member, and we go, wow, a member of the governing body made it out of the witnesses. You know why? Because we look up to him still as a former governing body member. We look up to the man because he held a high position in a cult organization. And we don't really know what that really means. It means also that it's much more difficult for a guy like him to come out of the cult mindset of the Watchtower Society. And I will say right now, I'm not judging Ray. I don't know whether he's in heaven or he's in hell. It's not for me to judge. It's not for me to judge anybody. But in life, he still held on to a great deal of Watchtower teaching. For all intents and purposes, he was still very much a Jehovah's Witness. And we look up to him because so many of us are still very much Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, it's funny because, and I'll be honest, I can put up a podcast, and if I describe it, and I've already put them up. If I describe a podcast as former Bethel worker so-and-so, I will have 5,000 or 6,000 views on that podcast. Former Watchtower headquarters worker, former elder, as opposed to former Jehovah's Witness, or former ministerial servant, that title. Because we still think, oh, they held a position. That's important. And we're still thinking that that position matters. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It does matter that someone has come out of the organization from high positions. But also because it matters to us because we think leadership. We think of leadership. And we curtail this idea of leadership like we do Jannies and Jambries. And we say, oh, I'm sure that when Jannies and Jambries came with them in Israel, the former top magicians of Pharaoh have left Egypt and Pharaoh to join and serve our God. And all they did the whole time they were there, because they were still thinking like top magicians in Egypt, they were causing problems amongst the camp of Israel. And there's so many of us that held former positions, and some who have not held any positions. Some of us still think like the way we did when we were in the organization. We may not go to the meetings anymore, but we're still very much Jehovah's Witnesses. And it really shows. There is a group called Women in the Wilderness. And already they have one that's anointed of God. We need to listen to her. She's the spokesperson. Pearl Doxy and her group. Just another cult. Just another Jehovah's Witness with another Jehovah's Witness type doctrine where she's now the governing body. She's replaced the governing body with herself. There are lots of little groups like that. There are lots of YouTube channels where we become the new governing body, the new elder, the new guru. We become the new famished men teaching things that can't feed anybody, leading astray flocks of people in ignorance because we passed on our bones instead of our meat, because we don't have any meat. We have just decided to take our bones from the Watchtower and start a new bone industry somewhere else. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 6 through 9. The early church could tell when wolves came amongst them. The whole idea that apostasy took over the church is a Jehovah's Witness doctrine. They were able to spot it. That's why you have the early writings of the church denouncing it, talking about it. That's why you have councils. It's like, look, this guy's got no grounds for teaching what he's teaching. Look, he's selling monopoly money. This ain't real currency. So I'm just wanted to let you guys know. There are those in the XJW community that are just another Ray Franz. They're going to do some good for you. They might do some good for you. But if you start looking to them for other things outside of the work that they've done on the Watchtower, you just might get a whole lot of Watchtower teaching regurgitated. You ever had vomit in your mouth? It's just nasty. It tastes so horrible. Acid reflux. That's what you got in some of these XJW communities. You have some of these channels are just acid reflux Watchtower teaching. I'll tell you what, I thoroughly enjoyed Ray's Crisis of Conscience. It was honest. It was great. But I'll tell you, me and Tom Cabine, a good friend of mine who was a Bethel overseer, we talk often about In Search of Christian Freedom, where Ray, the last 2 chapters of In Search of Christian Freedom, rejects the early Christian church because he's still stuck in the Watchtower mindset. Search of Christian Freedom was good until the last 2 chapters. The last 2 chapters, he pretty much throws the Apostle Paul under the bus, and he throws the early church fathers like Ignatius and Polycarp and other early church fathers under the bus, because he becomes anti-organization to the point where he doesn't believe that Christianity could have existed after the 1st century. He goes on and to propose the old Watchtower black hole apostasy. When the last apostle died, Christianity ceased. Christianity ceased when the last apostle died. Then what does Ray believe in? Or what did he believe in? What does anybody believe in? If Christianity died after the last apostle died, then as Paul says in the book of Corinthians, speaking of the resurrection, we are men most to be pitied. We're just passing on a bunch of fairy tales. So that's my message. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 6 through 7. It applies to Jehovah's Witnesses, and it also applies to many of us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. See us tomorrow. We're going to talk about all of these Bibles. 66 book Bibles, 73, 74, 81 book Bibles. What's the difference? What's the issue? What's the Apocrypha? What's the Nag Hammadi? What are the Gnostic writings? Are there lost books of the Bible? So on and etc. Check us out tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 o'clock in the West Coast. Dial 1-347-934-0379 to ask any questions or share any comments, as me and Catholic apologist William Albridge talk about the various canons of the Bible, and should that affect our perception of the Bible as God's Word. Take care, folks. Thanks for riding with me. Bye-bye.